What's going on, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be focusing on what would happen if Gavrilo Princip choked on his sandwich. Now, some of you might be thinking, who is Gavrilo Princip and what sandwich? Well, there's a story that goes around that says that Gavrilo Princip, who is Franz Ferdinand's assassin, had stopped to get a sandwich and an opportunity presented itself where the driver of Franz Ferdinand's carriage took a wrong turn and Gavrilo dropped his sandwich and went and shot Franz Ferdinand, as well as his wife Sophie, who were both sitting stationary in their wagon. After that, the July crisis happened, where Austria-Hungary sent Serbia a list of impossible demands and then ended up invading Serbia and starting World War I. So, what would have really happened if the sandwich ended up preventing young Gavrilo, who was only 19 years old at the time, from carrying out the assassination? In this vid, I'll be focusing on what happens if Gavrilo chokes on his sandwich and the implications that come because of it. Strap in and let's do it. Now, picture this. It's a sunny day in Sarajevo. It is June the 28th, 1914. There are 6 men that have been ordered to take out Archduke Franz Ferdinand within his motorcade. They have been assigned different individual positions to set up along the path of his visit. Their goal is to free Bosnia from Austro-Hungarian control, and taking out the heir to their throne is apparently a good way to do this, on orders of the Black Hand Gang. First up is Mohammed Mehmed Basic, who is given a bomb and is waiting near the Austro-Hungarian bank. Mehmed Basic watches the Archduke pass him by and does nothing. Fair enough, I'd probably do the same. Next up is Vaso Kubrilovic, who I'm probably butchering the name of, who is armed with a pistol and bomb. Kubrilovic also sits back and watches the motorcade go past and fails to act. Next is Nedeljko Kabrinovic, who throws his bomb at Mr. Ferdinand's car. However, the bomb bounces off their convertible cover and blows up underneath the car in the motorcade and injures up to 20 people. Kabrinovic tries to unalive himself and swallow cyanide and jumps into the nearby river, but the cyanide pill has expired and an angry mob pull him out and he is arrested immediately. After this incident, the Archduke decides to full speed and go to the town hall of the city where they attend a reception. On his way there, he passes Vjetko Popovic, Gavrilo Princip and Trifun Grabez, who are all unable to act because the motorcade is going at high speed. Franz Ferdinand then leaves the town hall, and rather than go on their original planned route, they decide to go to a hospital to visit the injured from the bombing. At this point, the other 3 assassins that have been implicated in the plot assume that something's up, but also can see that the motorcade is still speeding ahead and so they can't do a whole lot. Gavrilo, one of the last 3 assassins, decides to go to a nearby cafe, Schiller's Delicatessen, and hopes that the motorcade comes back the same way and is not too far from the action. Now, this is the part of the story that is actually a bit questionable. Apparently, the sandwich is a myth. There's nowhere that says that Gavrilo ate a sandwich, and why a sandwich would appear in a Bosnian cafe in 1914 seems a bit weird anyway, like why would he not get burek or something else? But Gavrilo is confirmed to have gone into the cafe, and this says here that Gavrilo was sitting at a table at the cafe, but if he wasn't eating or ordering anything, why was he sitting down? It's anyone's guess as to what Gavrilo ordered for brunch that day. I'm going to assume Gavrilo ordered something so at least he had some table etiquette. Anyway, Gavrilo sees the Archduke come back in his motorcade, where his driver has stalled the engine right out the front of the cafe. Gavrilo seizes the opportunity to fulfill the assassination, and well, he does just that. He runs next to the stalled vehicle, shoots twice, and Franz Ferdinand and his wife die shortly after. Gavrilo and the rest of the conspirators are arrested, and following the July crisis, World War I starts a month later on the 28th of July. We all know the implications of such a big war, and how modern history changed overnight because of Gavrilo's actions that day. But, what if in an alternate timeline, Gavrilo chokes on his sandwich, or burek, and doesn't accomplish his task? What ends up happening as a result? Let's rewind. The first 2 conspirators, Mohammed Mehmed Basic and Vaso Kubrilovic, fail to act just like what happens in our timeline. Nedeljko Kabrinovic throws the bomb and it fails to hit the Archduke's car, but instead bounces under the car behind the Archduke's car and wounds the same amount of people. The motorcade goes to the town hall and then decides to go to the hospital to visit the wounded from the bomb attack. As the motorcade approaches Schiller's Delicatessen, Gavrilo jumps up to go and shoot the Archduke, but he jumps up too quickly and begins to choke on his burek, or sandwich. He can't believe the timing. Some people inside begin to help Gavrilo and eventually the food gets dislodged and he's alright. But this has taken far too long. The Archduke has already turned the corner and continues to follow the procession of cars towards the hospital. But Gavrilo has missed this chance, and once Kabrinovic confesses under torture who else is implicated in the plot, he is also arrested not long after. Only Mehmed Basic manages to escape capture and goes into hiding into Montenegro and manages to evade arrest, just like in our timeline. So, now that the Archduke manages to survive, what happens next? As Jabrinovich's bomb manages to go off and injure the car behind the Archdukes, there is still a plot which is uncovered and all the conspirators, with the exception of Mehmed Basic, are arrested. Austria-Hungary is not happy, to say the least. They discover that the conspirators are of Bosnian Serb origin, and they immediately cut diplomatic ties with Serbia. Although, because the Archduke lives in this timeline, we see there being no reason as to go to war, as the casus belli is not strong enough to warrant going to war with Serbia. No ultimatum is issued, and the Serbs and Austro-Hungarians do not go to war in July 1914. So what happens next? Well, my belief is that World War I was going to kick off anyway, regardless of whether it started in July 1914 or later on. But because World War I doesn't start in July 1914, right at the time that it did, what happens? For this, I asked my bad boy Chatgpt, as always, and the results that it gave me were a little spicy, to say the least. The first one it gave me was this. Chatgpt reckons that World War I breaks out, but just at a later date. This is anyone's guess as to what caused the war to break out later, or what the catalyst was going to be. But I firmly believe that the war was always going to break out. But when is also a pretty important question, because in 1914, Russia is on its way to becoming an industrialized and more modern giant. There was heavy investment in Russia as well by other allied powers, and the assumption was that Germany and the Central Powers want to fight as soon as possible before Russia becomes industrialized and actually poses as a serious threat to their eastern border. Russia was also undergoing economic and military reform as well. This is not to say that Russia would have been a superpower or ready for war at a later stage. Its absolute monarchy stifled growth and reform, it had poor living standards for its people, and it had lost a conflict against Japan in 1905, the first time a European power had ever lost to an Asian power. Considering that Germany is the only properly industrialized state out of the four Central Powers, it needs to fight while it still has a technological advantage. Because of this, I think this puts Germany and Austria-Hungary on a bit of a timer with how soon they can fight. If a conflict is stalled for another 10 years or so, Russia ends up being way more powerful, and it's debatable as to whether the Central Powers can fight more effectively. So, Austria-Hungary and Germany want to fight ASAP, but they need a reason to do so. Even in the original ultimatum that Austria-Hungary gives to Serbia in July 1914, they had deliberately crafted it so that Serbia could not accept all the demands and that they could start a war anyway. Of course, alliances with other countries could also have been arranged, but I don't think it could have made much of an impact. Shout out to Italy for this. So, if they didn't have enough of a reason to start a war, this leads on to the next point suggested by ChatGPT, which is a different catalyst for the war. Now this could really be anything, although with how the last few wars had panned out in the early 1910s, I'm going to put my money on it breaking out over something that happens in the Balkans, or it involves one of the Balkan states doing something to antagonize another state. So, Albania, Romania, Bulgaria, the Ottoman Empire, Serbia, Greece or Montenegro all have something to do with this next war breaking out, or it being the catalyst. Balkans, just calm down lads. But yeah, I do 100% see a conflict emerging, and I believe that it would happen within at least the next 5 years of Gavrilo choking on his sandwich. So the next point the ChatGPT suggests is interesting, because it says that there is a possibility that the Austro-Hungarian Empire could be preserved, and I just don't know about this one. Like, this empire was just second rate at best. There was nothing that redeemed this empire from saving itself, and the longer Russia is allowed to industrialize, Austria-Hungary is also on a timer. Except I don't think that Austria-Hungary is able to modernize or industrialize as quickly or as effectively as Russia. It was also industrializing, but it had a much smaller population base than Russia, was much more ethnically diverse in a smaller area, a recipe for disaster, and it was always going to be on the opposite side of Russia over any future conflict, especially if it started in the Balkans. Once this empire lost a war on the magnitude of World War I, it was never coming back. I'm not feeling this point by ChatGPT, although the next one is interesting because there will undoubtedly be a different Europe that comes from the delay of World War I starting. So in this timeline, I still believe a war will break out within 5 years of 1914. Germany and Austria-Hungary realize that they cannot beat Russia after it has continued to industrialize, so they need to act now. But Russia has reformed their military and economy enough that, while they still lose considerably on the Eastern Front, it is delayed enough that the Western allies are able to beat Germany on the Western Front and sue for peace. As Russia barely manages to hold out, it is also a winner in the conflict. But what changes does this mean? Well, for one, the communist revolution never happens in Russia. Instead, it happens in the defeated Austro-Hungarian Empire. This is actually what happened in Hungary after World War I anyway, but it might gain some greater ground as the breakup of these states continues to remain fragmented and weak. As Russia doesn't want Romania to become enlarged by a significant margin, it forces Romania to back off with Hungary, and Hungary ultimately has the world's first surviving communist government because it never loses a war to Romania and is never defeated by them. This might spread to other countries that were formerly part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but it's unpopular, and any country that ends up accepting this form of communism becomes diplomatically isolated. The German and Ottoman empires would also collapse, and because many of the Russian war aims actually centered on the Balkans and the seizure of Constantinople, there would be further conflict with the Turks during their War of Independence. Russia really wanted Constantinople, but I imagine they actually never get this because the other Western allies wouldn't allow it. So, moving on to the 20th century, we see a defeated Germany, a carve-up of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, a larger Russian Empire, a US that is also on its way to becoming a superpower, and ultimately the rise of fascism and communism, mostly in Central Europe. If communism takes hold in Hungary after World War I, would they try to go down the path of international revolution despite being much weaker than Leninist Russia in our timeline? Probably not, I'd say. World War II might also happen, but it would be interesting to see which states are and are not involved in this new timeline. As Italy still probably receives a fraction of its war aims, it probably ends up having the world's first fascist government, as Germany may also follow this path under the leadership of someone who is quite infamous. Although if Hitler does come to power again under a banner of fascism, I feel as though Russia, which by the 1930s would have significantly reformed economically, militarily and politically, would be a major hindrance to his war aims. And, likewise, in this new Treaty of Versailles, the same stipulations that are given to Germany are more or less the same, although it is not split into two with its Königsberg exclave like in our timeline. Germany loses all its overseas colonies and is forced to pay reparations to all the major Allied powers. A main difference now is that Imperial Russia stays until the end of the war, and now a much more powerful Russia has a real say in the negotiation process. Poland is a rump state that is sandwiched between Germany and Russia, and is also carved out of territory of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire. As Russia has become more influential in this timeline, Britain and France both sever their alliances with it, as they are wary of Russian influence in the eastern part of Europe. This is anyone's guess as to what happens with how the post-World War I peace pans out within this new map of Europe. So, what happens if Gavrilo Princip chokes on his sandwich? The assassination of the Archduke fails to take place, but Germany and Austria-Hungary still want to go to war sooner rather than later, as Russia continues to modernize. There is not a large enough casus belli in July 1914 for them to consider war though. A war does break out within the next 5 years, and this time the Central Powers are defeated again, although Russia no longer has their revolution as they are able to modernize and industrialize enough that they don't collapse in 1917, as they barely manage to hold on. Communism and fascism take hold within Central Europe, with communism starting in Hungary and fascism probably still starting in Italy, and Russia begins to become diplomatically isolated because they become far too powerful within Europe. The Ottoman Empire also dissolves, and the Turkish state also emerges after they fight their War of Independence. Turkey manages to retain Constantinople and Asia Minor during their War of Independence. The US continues to emerge as a superpower, and later World War II may occur, although Germany can never rise to the level of power that they were at, as they were always having a very powerful Russia next door to them. Anyway guys, this is me just spitballing some ideas. Who knows what could have really happened if Gavrilo choked on his sandwich? I mean, Burek. There are a million possibilities that could have happened because of him not assassinating Franz Ferdinand. Going off the AI suggestions, historical data, and trying to analyze how powerful states were in 1914 is literally the only variables that I can use, so it might not be exactly what you think it could be. What do you think would have happened if Gavrilo choked on his sandwich? Leave a comment, I'd be really interested to see some different alternatives. If you liked the video at all, make sure to slap the like button and subscribe. It helps me out heaps and it gives me a reason to keep on procrastinating from doing real work. Peace out guys, I'll see you in the next one.